Okay, I begin. So Edwin Luthiens, he was born in 1869 and died in 1944. So he was 75 years old when he died, and he is considered very, very highly in the context of British architecture. So, sir, he was a sir. I mean, you know, in England, in Great Britain, if you have accomplishments above a certain level, there is a very good chance you'll become a sir if you are a man, and you'll become a dame if you are a lady. Like Zaha Hadid, who became a dame. Being a dame is the equivalent for women for being a sir. So Sir Edwin Landseer, he had a middle name, Lutyens. Um, I don't know what those initials are, probably have to do with some qualifications. Was born on the 29th of March, 1869, and died on the 1st of January, 1944. Was an English architect known for imaginatively adapting traditional architectural styles to the requirements of his era. He designed many English country houses, war memorials, I'm sorry, and public buildings. In his biography, the writer Christopher Hussey wrote, in his lifetime, Lutyens was widely held to be our greatest architect since Christopher Wren, if not, as many men maintained, his superior. The architectural historian Gavin Stamp described him as, I quote, surely the greatest British architect of the 20th or of any other century. Now, I don't know when this historian made this statement, but Great Britain continues to have very important architects. And I'm not so sure Mr. Sir Norman Foster would be very happy to read this, this statement of this historian. And there are others, perhaps. Lutyens played an instrumental role in designing and building New Delhi, which would later on serve as the seat of the government of India. In recognition of his contribution, New Delhi is also known as Lutyens Delhi. In collaboration with Sir Herbert Baker, he was also the main architect of several monuments in New Delhi, such as the India Gate. He also designed Viceroy's house, which is now known as the, let me see if I can read, the Rashtrapati Bhavan. Many of his works were inspired by Indian architecture. Now, I think this is very interesting, but the relationship between Great Britain and India is an intimate one and a very interesting one. There were other architects. There was even an architect like Baker who left England, left Great Britain, and established himself modestly but significantly in India. And so the relationship between India and Great Britain is a complex one. And I think the influence went both ways. Great Britain influenced India, India influenced Great Britain. And, I'm sure there are books about this subject, the cross-fertilization between two great countries. This was the man. I like the fabric of his suit. In Great Britain, there is still a tradition, a great tradition of tailoring and using very fine materials. I like often to make a few maybe frivolous or not so important considerations about how one is dressed. Now, we don't see too much in this picture, but we see a little bit. And I have to say, I envy the fabric of his suit. So this architect who is, I'm not so sure he is well known in some parts of the world, although he does deserve to be known. And, for the first period of his life, you might say that he was a Victorian architect, although he was 31 when the 19th century ended. So he was still young, but if we look at his works, here we see an architect who was not rejecting the past, who was not turning his back on the past, who had an ability to bring what we call tradition into the present, meaning his present. And while he was not the only architect who did so, he did it in a very, very convincing way. Some drawings by Sir Edwin Luthiens. He drew well, I would say, but you know, he's not the only architect to draw well. As you can see, there is still a concern with the so-called past, a lot. But such a concern even Le Corbusier had when he was very young, at 22, visiting southeastern, Central and Southeastern Europe, drawing a lot, sketching, and even publishing a book called Journey to the East. More than that, I don't know if you know, but Le Corbusier truly surprised me when I read on a page in this book that I mentioned, Journey to the East, that he actually advocated the cause of the vernacular architecture, if you can believe it. Yes, Le Corbusier, he did so, and he asked himself if there is truly, not with these words, but in essence, he said that he felt that the quest of the new, for the sake of the new, being detrimental to the, you know, the vernacular architecture, if it was such a great accomplishment. And we are talking here about Le Corbusier, the great reformer, the great revolutionary. By comparison, Edwin Luthiens was just a little bit older than Le Corbusier, actually, was not so radical. Plus, he was coming from a culture which always had a great respect for tradition. So, you know, the kind of drawing we see here with a sloping roof, you know, the chimneys is definitely an architecture that is not easily accepting you know, the dogmatic, orthodox modernism of the terrace jardin, if we are to talk about Le Corbusier. So we see roofs, we see sloping roofs coming to us from other centuries, and the Luthiens welcomed them. And of course, he was not the only one. Also, the architecture of monuments, you know, there wasn't such a great interest in an architecture of monuments or monumental architecture in the Orthodox modern movement or the modernity of our day even. Who builds monuments these days? Very rarely we see such a concern. But it was not the same in the 19th century. And it was not the same in the case of Edwin Luthiens. You know, there were certain programs that were different from ours. For example, in the 19th century, many architects designed a lot of graves. And who is doing something like this today? You know, not many people. So somehow it seems our relationship with the past and implicitly with death changed dramatically. You know, in the 19th century, you know, people built lots of monuments. So there was nostalgia, there was reverence, there was, you know, respect for one's past and history. And also there were many designs of cemeteries and gravestones and, you know, tombs and so on, chapels and so on. I don't know of any architect in the 19th century who didn't design a few. But in the 20th century, especially in the second half, and in the 21st century, no one would even think about making a project for a monument or making designing domus eterna. No way. And I think this is a great loss because we are only concerned with the present, and we have no interest in the afterlife. And I think this impoverishes a lot life. So here he is. This is a sketch on some kind of stationery that he had, talking about monuments, right? What else do we see here? A monument. This is a monumental architecture. It's a sketch for, I don't know exactly the function, but it does certainly look like a monument. He designed some incredible villas, and I like very much these houses. In fact, it was a strange day for me. I planned to play. I could still do it maybe, although the sound is not so good. To play some music by Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, because he bought a house designed by Edwin Luthiens. But we'll arrive there. We'll see. On the other hand, it shows clearly that this was an architect who knew very well how to draw. And, the kind of drawings that architects from his time did are very different from the drawings that architects of today do. If I am to talk about the stars of today, if we look at the drawings of, let's say, Frank Gehry, or the drawings of Bjarke Ingels, or the drawings of, I don't know, I can name a few of them. They are very, very different. The drawings of the sketches of Frank Gehry are, extremely elusive, so to speak, and you barely see anything there. It's just, some kind of a scribble, some kind of a doodle. Then the drawings of Ingels are, in my opinion, approaching almost dangerously the status, if I can say so, of a cartoon. I mean, they are a little bit cartoonish. So there is a great difference. And this shows, in a way, our mental disposition in the 21st century. Who draws something like this, these days? Of course, here, this is a perspective, a manual, a linear perspective drawn, maybe even traced. Initially, we don't work like this any longer. And some of the drawings of the masters of today are very self-indulgent in a way. And, I'm thinking of various architects, from Wolf Prix and Zaha Hadid, and again, Frank Gehry. And although as an exception, I would say, I would place Tom Main from Morphosis, who draws in a very abstract way, it's true, but very, very lyrically. I think his drawings have a lyrical quality, and I suggest to you, if you want, to check out the drawings of Tom Main from Morphosis. He himself received the Pritzker Prize at one point. By the way, of Pritzker Prize, I don't know if you know, but in December, I initiated kind of an impossible endeavor to offer the so-called metaphysical, the other Pritzker Prize, to the architects who didn't receive it. And by now I offered, in essence, it's nothing. It's just a thought, an affectionate thought. But until now, it was Stephen Hall who received it, who surprisingly didn't receive the Pritzker. Then Wolf Prix, who also surprisingly didn't receive. And then Bernard Tschumi, who also didn't receive it. And in April, I already declared I will offer a post-mortem other Pritzker Prize to John Woodson, But in March, I thought of offering one, if the word offering is even appropriate, to Eric Miralles. But what I want to say, I neglected something in December. There is a woman architect who deserves the other Pritzker Prize. And in fact, she deserved the Pritzker Prize, but she didn't get it. And that is Lina Bobardi. So on her birthday in December this year, God willing, if everything goes okay, until then, I will offer the other Pritzker Prize to Lina Bobardi, because I think the Pritzker Prize should be also offered post-mortem to people who were alive when the Pritzker was alive, but didn't get it. This is my opinion. Anyway, moving forward with some sketches and drawings by Edwin Luthiens. Now, I don't know if he did this cartoon. A thinking architect. That's what we see from this sketch. So I could have included more drawings. That's why I'm saying this presentation deserves some development. Now, from 1897, so he was 26 years old when he did this. 26 years old, this house, and you know, it appears to be so-called traditional, but it has a vigor, a vitality, and even its geometry is very emphatically announcing what was to come. That is a certain level of modernity. Also, the gardens played an important role in the vicinity, in the proximity of his villas, and you know, the British garden is I don't know if he employed the services of a gardener or a landscape architect, or if he designed them themselves. But there is a unity between the garden and the building. And I think such a unity is very important. And I was even thinking, usually we do the garden after we build the house. But what if we design the house after we make the garden? That is, to start with the garden and then design the house in such a way to be in conjunction with what the garden is, to accommodate the house to the garden, as opposed to the other way, as usually it is done. You know, yes, this is an architecture that still refers to what preceded it, to the past. But at the same time, if you look at the simplicity of the volumes, there is already something so-called modern already, I would say. To combine tradition with innovation is almost a necessity. Otherwise, without innovation, tradition risks of being stiff, of being, almost dying, actually. And I made a little discovery, if I can call it so, and maybe it's not very, very, very rigorous, but I noticed that in different languages, the word tradition, like in English, has the same etymological root with the word treason. In English is like this, tradition, treason. In French is like this, tradition, trahir, trahison. Even in Romanian, you have tradition, tradiție și trădare. And this is, to me, very interesting. Now, maybe I project my own conclusion or my own set of expectations into this etymology, but I like to think that tradition, in order to be alive and to even grow, it needs, at times at least, to to receive some levels of betrayals. Because if you don't betray, then what you receive from the past remains statically unchanged. And it's actually, I think about the relationship between being and becoming. Tradition needs not only to be, but also to become. And in order to become, it needs also a certain insertion or infusion of a certain level or certain layers of treason. And what would this treason be? You know, it's when you try to bring what was in the past into the present through interventions that would not have been conceivable in the past. But to do it in such a way without irritating or erasing the validity and the seriousness and the validity of what preceded you. It's not easy, but I think it's possible. If we look at this house by Lutyens, we would, yes, the superficial reading would be, this is an old house, you know, it's a traditional house. But it's not more traditional than the early works by Frank Lloyd Wright, who also used sloping roofs. And look at these triangles. I mean, there is a geometrical vigor here, which I would say is rather modern. And, you know, this was an announcement in a way, because he was 26 years old when he designed this house. Sorry about this plan. Now the plan maybe is not so relevant to what we see here. And it could be even maybe misleading, because you looking at this plan, you wouldn't necessarily expect to see this. In fact, looking at this might make you think that in the plan, there might be also some triangles, similar somehow to the frontons that we see here. Well, it's not the case. But it was the end of the 19th century. It was an eclectic time. It was the Victorian time. There was a great passion for the neo-Gothic. There was great interest in other historical so-called styles. The 19th century was immersed in a love affair with history, maybe more than other centuries. And so, you know, in that context, Edwin Luthiens inevitably was designing in this way. But in my opinion, is nothing wrong with designing in this way. In fact, I think this villa still stands the test of time. 1899, so he was 28 years old. And this was the famous turn of the century. I have to tell you, I once bought in Vienna, or in Vienna, in Austria, a book from a flea market, which was published in 1885 or 1887, and with artworks by artists of the time, Austrian artists of the time. And I learned that there was a new edition of that book published in 1897 or 1899. So at the time when this building was built, which was very, very valued, so valued in fact that the one page from that book would sell for 20,000 euros, one page of a book. Because why this happened? Because the Austrian architects, the Austrian artists who published in the first edition, in the second edition, became emancipated in a modern way. In other words, there were already signs of modernity. And actually the publisher of the book, a photographer and an engraver, a graphic artist, is considered the father of modernism in Austria. Why do I mention this? Because the turn of the century was without doubt a very, in a way, tensioned moment, because, you know, just as the end of the 20th century was very tensioned, and postmodernism expressed this tension, and then deconstructivism, here at the turn of the century, the aesthetics were on the verge of a capital change. That capital change didn't occur yet, but significant architects were already preparing the ground. Edwin Luthiens, he was still, and I love this building. I mean, if I had the means, I would be happy to live in such a building. It's a building that connects you with other times, and maybe particularly the Gothic, but there is a clarity of the composition, which is, again, I think there is also some level of modernity. But it is a romantic architecture. For those who love the past, would love these buildings. You know, thick brick walls, and then ivy, and ceramic tiles on the roofs, and the big chimneys. And this is an architecture that doesn't really acknowledge the Industrial Revolution. It was as if architecture was still resistant to the realities of what we call the Industrial Revolution. Big buildings, yes. He was very young. I mean, 28 years old, and he already had commissions that anyone would love today, included. So this is the plan of the house you saw. Of course, if you look at the plan, you can't really imagine. We looked at a picture taken from here. There is the courtyard. The plan is abstract, is graphic, is a drawing. But if you look at the building, it's something else. If you look at the plans of a modern building, modern understood, respecting the dogma of Orthodox modernism, it's easier somehow to predict kind of correctly the image of that building. But in the case of this architecture, where you have sloping roofs and the materiality, that the tectonics of the building are more complex, this is the building and this is the plan. So, somehow, the so-called tradition had this virtue that it worked with organic materials, and that, changes a lot. If this building was built with the means of today, with concrete walls and, steel and glass, you can use the same plan. In fact, an exercise could be done, to take a plan of a so-called famous house that was built in a certain way, and imagine it, or maybe even build it, the very same house, but with the materials of the present, or vice versa. Let's imagine, let's take the plans of Villa Savoye, and let's build it with the materials of Edwin Luthiens. How would Villa Savoye look like? Of course, certain things would not work, because the principles, the dogmas that Le Corbusier generated would not easily accommodate organic materials. But it would be an interesting exercise, because in the process of trying to build Villa Savoye, not in concrete, not with a lot of glass and not with steel, instead with masonry and with a chimney and, kind of like Lutyens, another house would be born. But you can start from the plan and the sections. I don't know. I just had this idea. I was just thinking aloud. Here in the interior, we don't see a lot of invention, perhaps, or perhaps not. I mean, there is the vigorous structure. There is the the convincing aesthetics of what we see here. So I don't know, with a little bit of so-called cleaning up, this could be very modern if we maybe take away the rug, although there are rugs, Persian rugs, even in the buildings by Louis Kahn. Sorry about this resolution. 1900, the famous 1900. Another work, a brilliant work by Edwin Luthiens. I mean, look at this glorious villa. I think it is glorious by any standards. You know, it's a very fine work. And you know, he was 29 years old. 29 years old, but this is a very mature work. And you know, is it worse, this building, than Villa Savoie? Since I mentioned Villa Savoie, I don't think it is. It's a different kind of house. It's a different kind of estate. But, you know, if we are to reflect on what a home is and what a house is, this building is passing all the tests, I think. It is interesting in terms of the articulation of the volumes. It is sculptural. It is coherent. Too bad I don't have other pictures. I'm actually mad at myself. I should have developed this presentation more, but I don't know how time passed so quickly. Anyway, but it is an invitation for you and for myself to keep working, trying to learn more about this architect. So 1900, Godard's in Surrey, and this is a house. This is the house, and this is another view of the house. And now we go to one from 1901. This one I love. I love it because I love the Gothic. I love the Middle Ages. I love brick, and I love the lack of adornments. I mean, there is ornamentation, but there is no plaster. The walls are not covered. They are not hidden. You see how the wall was built. You see the masonry that has nobility, because you see the very making of that wall, a brick above another brick above another brick. And, you know, it's a subtle yet clear, yes, a little bit mysterious. It is romantic. I love this building. Even here, look, you know, this is an architecture that in a way is timeless. It's old, but also new somehow. I mean, really, Orthodox modernity with all its inventions, I don't think necessarily was always a great progress. What I love about these walls is that even if when they so-called get, you know, dirty or affected by the elements, by the winds, the rains, the snow, and so on, they still have this beautiful, you know, authenticity, this patina. They are real. They are not. Look at the texture of the walls. You know, it's so rich. It's like the rich woolen suit that he himself was wearing, Edwin Luthiens, in that old picture. It's real. This wall is real. And you would ask, why was this necessary? You know, which is clearly an ornamentation. Even here, you know, why was this necessary? You know, but then I would answer with what John Ruskin, in fact, asked. You know, well, no, he didn't ask. He stated that in nature, the most beautiful things are also the most useless. And he gave us an example, as I kept saying at other times, the tale of the peacock. It's really about, you know, in a way, yes, there is maybe the coherence of the weaving, the weaving of the wall, but it's also like this. It's a capricious ornamental gesture which has its significance too. And it doesn't matter that, not all the bricks have the same dimension. Really, it doesn't matter. The wall is very convincing as it is. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, we could call here about the perfection of imperfection, if I am to refer to a statement about the works of Lina Bobardi by a critic of architecture and art. So I love this, Really, can you compare our walls today, our sleek, smooth, clean, white walls of the present with this wall? In my opinion, we can't. No, this invites you almost to caress it. Is alive, is organic, and it ages well. This is something that differentiates contemporary means of production and construction from the traditional ones. These walls age well. Ours very rarely do so. But look at this. I think it's glorious. It's a little, and this is only a house, a little house in a way. But look what he did here. We don't do this sort of thing any longer because our architecture banished ornament, and we just have sterile white walls everywhere. That's it, and glass, and here and there steel. That's it. But here, just on this fragment, it's a symphonic work, really. You see all these bricks coming together and singing. I mean, that's what I see. Maybe I am a sentimentalist. It's possible. On the other hand, there is honesty. This is an honest building. It's not, even when there is ornamentation, it's not in order to hide, like self-indulgent makeup. No, it's to amplify in a way the honesty of the building. It's a great building, whatever other people might think. In my opinion, it's a great building. And who cares? It was done, at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, in the 17th century, the 12th century, the 22nd century. It's timeless. And so is the brick. The brick, but look, here is a special work. Look at the mortar. I mean, I don't know if this was a traditional technique, but it's enjoyable to look at the richness of essentially a small surface of the wall. And now we look at the plan. Sorry, it's like this. Well, the plan is the plan. It's an abstract notation, right? From here to what we saw, there is a certain distance. Imagine, again, you took this plan and you built upon it or from it with contemporary means of production and building and construction. It would be a different building. First of all, we wouldn't imagine to have sloping roofs, probably. And then, I don't know. I still wouldn't like to move away from what I see here at all.
Why is the drawing room so big?
Why is the drawing so big?
Yes.
Well, that picture that we saw is well, I guess there is a part here that we don't see. Let's see, where is this door on the plan? It's here probably, no? Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Yes, but on the right there is a drawing room, or I guess it's a workshop, but it's very large compared to other.
Well, I'm sure the picture, the photograph of the building is real, and the plan is also real. There are these fragmentations that I understand in a way the puzzlement that the plan, first of all, what we saw is a view from somewhere here. We don't see all this part behind. So, you know, it's also fragmented. So you don't see the vastness of the plan. It's true. You don't somehow you don't expect this kind of architecture seen from here when you see this plan. I understand, but let's see other. You see already here, you realize that it's an ample house. But it's not so tall, and it is fragmented in smaller units. So because of it, you don't see it monolithically, I guess, as a big like yesterday we saw the buildings of Mies. I'm not referring to his houses, but different institutional buildings. They are just monolithical. Here is a different kind of architecture. It's also this interplay between courtyard and the building, and then vegetation. And so there is a collaboration, so to speak. There is a dance in a way that the building and the garden perform together. We saw this one. I'm very unhappy with myself, and I apologize. I feel now like recreating this PowerPoint presentation and dwell more on this, in my opinion, very important projects. But let's take it as an introduction to his work. And I don't think too many people pay homage to Edwin Luthiens today, but we do on his very birthday. This is another house. I think this is the one bought by Jimmy Page. He certainly has a good taste. These rock and rollers, I don't know, if I'm not an expert in this kind of music, but you wouldn't expect an important member of Led Zeppelin to buy this house. But I'm actually happy that he did, because it shows sensitivity and knowledge and good taste, high standards, actually. But yes, when you listen to the music of Led Zeppelin, you would expect the musicians who could have bought anything to buy a different kind of house, not this one. If you compare with mansions built in Victorian England, this building has a simplicity and a vigor in terms of its geometry that the more traditional buildings do not have. On the other hand, is not saying no to what we call tradition. Yes, the home of Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, and here he is. And I mean, Led Zeppelin, now a very, in a way, progressive group music in the 20th century. But this man was sensitive enough to desire to live in this house. And so, maybe the house doesn't have to necessarily express always what you do. After all, Albert Einstein, he lived in almost a gingerbread house in Princeton, New Jersey, with sloping roofs and a veranda and so on. Here you have Jimmy Page living in this rather opulent house designed by Edwin Luthiens. Yes, this would have been a great moment to listen to some guitar work by this truly great, amazing guitarist. It's a fine house. Again, what can I say? I mean, I look at the brick wall and the ceramics of the roof and the chimney and the glasswork here, with windows that are not made of a large piece of glass, but small pieces of glass brought together. And yes, I am nostalgic. I wish somehow we can get rid of our obsession with very large pieces of glass with a demagogy of glass. There is glass here too. If you add up all these windows, it's a large surface, but it's fragmented. There is multiplicity in unity. There are many little parts that compose the big part, and it's a different feeling altogether. This is the house, the plan. Here we have a courtyard again, quite a voluminous kitchen. Where is the living room? Maybe upstairs? I only have this plan. There is no upstairs here. No, there is, from what I see. But there is a dining room, there is a hall, there is a sitting room, and there is the glorious kitchen, and then smaller rooms there. Even a room for bicycles, not bad. I wonder if this was done like this then when it was built, with a room for bicycles. I truly think the bicycle is the vehicle of the future. Enough with the cars, really. I mean, you cannot arrive with a bike where you arrive with a car, but the levels of pollution in the world do not allow us any longer to contemplate. Even the so-called electrical car, even that car needs energy, and is, in the end, is not the most angelic human invention, the car. Kenneth Frampton even thinks that the car destroyed the city, and he is not the only one to think in this way. People run like mad people, you know, continuously with their cars, you know. And especially in this country now, you know, I see this fascination with cars, you know. Maybe because we didn't have them until 1989, and now is the time for the revenge, and everybody's running like crazy, forgetting the pollution, which is very, very high in Bucharest. Not to speak about the war in Iraq and other calamities and tragedies that happen because we need gas for the cars. The bicycles, as you know, they just need the movement of our legs. That's it. They are very sustainable and ecological. Anyway, so this is where Jimmy Page lives. It's a romantic house, yes. The Gothic is always romantic. I don't know of anyone who doesn't love Gothic towns or villages. Really, we love them. We travel to Italy or I don't know where. We are seduced by the charm of the old romantic villages and towns of the Middle Ages. Yet the urbanism that is studied in schools has nothing to do with those charming cities and villages. Nothing. And it's amazing to me because we do love them. But now our open-ended urbanism, you know, spreading, or the monumental, the megalomania of Le Corbusier for Ville Radieuse, you know, thank God was not built. I admire Le Corbusier, but I don't know. I think this kind of architecture that we look at now is making even nature smile. You know, that's why nature climbs so happily on those brick walls. Jimmy Page has the time of his life here, no doubt. Can you imagine, you know, the Led Zeppelin quintessential musician playing his guitar in this building? I only hope the walls will not fall apart. They probably won't. They are built seriously. And look at this fragment of the facade. It's almost like a human face, isn't it? So even using a language that is apparently, you know, rather traditionalist, architecture can be very, very seductive and convincing. And again, no plaster. We don't need plaster. If the wall is built well, it has enough nobility. And the interior also is interesting. It even has contortions. You know, the wooden structure is not banal, it's not predictable, it's interesting. And so there are levels of creativity here that are to be appreciated. I can only envy Jimmy Page. 1911, the British Medical Association in Tavistock Square, London. This is a different kind of building because it's inside London. It's an urban building, it's not in nature. But nevertheless, Edwin Luthiens showed his skill. It's a building that is not to be ignored. And it uses again brick. So you know, brick very rarely disappoints us. I think Frank Lloyd Wright was totally right in this case, where he said, "Give me a brick and I'll transform it into its equivalent in gold." Yes, brick is probably one of the most magnificent construction materials. It was, and it is, and it will be. Especially if it is not hidden behind plaster or I don't know what. Now, the architect also designed the interior. You know, in fact, maybe he started from the interior towards the outside when he designed the building. That's why I'm asking myself, is it really a great thing to separate the interior designer from the architect? I don't think it is. I cannot imagine Le Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright employing the services of an interior designer to design the interiors of their buildings. No way. And in fact, these architects also design the gardens, often. The Great Dixter in East Sussex, 1912, another villa, and look at the garden. It is glorious. And look at the bushes and the plants and the flowers. And it's just this paradisiacal environment, you know, where this building certainly would not claim what one of the partners, in fact, the chief designer of MVRDV said, to outsmart nature. No, Edwin Luthiens would have never thought of using such a language to outsmart nature. How could you outsmart nature? Please turn off the microphone, please. Thank you. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. Should I interrupt the presentation and mute that microphone myself? Thank you. Look at the colors, the colors of organic materials. You know, I'm sorry, I have to do this. Okay. Okay, so we continue. Sorry about this interruption. So I look at this picture and I see a beautiful conjunction between nature, the garden, and the building. And it's almost as if there is a cohabitation here, that it's supported by the fact that the materials, the construction materials of the house are also somehow belonging to the earth. There are ceramic tiles, there are brick walls, and you know, I think this is very important. But I don't know. I mean, can we build today in this way for a large group of people? This is the question. Of course, we can build a house for a family or a few houses for a few families. But when you have to address the huge population of the world today, could we afford to build in this way? On the other hand, considering that there is a great need for sustainability, I think we should contemplate somehow building, at least to an extent, in this way. There are already, as you know, talks about and even projects for office towers built of wood. Um, you know, maybe there is a need for different programs, less emphatically obsessed with growth, and growth again. So yeah, you know, the progressivist might accuse Edwin Luthiens that he is nostalgic here, that he built in a way which is not really, you know, acceptable for our time. But I don't know. I still think we can learn. We can learn from Lutyens. And this is an architecture which does not reject the rural. This is also important to say. It's an architecture built, designed by a man who belonged to the city, but who had the ability to understand rurality. And Ibrahim Kolkhas was right that you know, the village is supposed to concern us again in a significant way, then maybe we should do it and find inspiration in the work like the works of Lutyens or even Palladio. You know, the works not in terms of style, but in terms of imagining an architecture which has some attributes of urbanity, but at the same time belongs to rurality. And if nature is crucially important for us today, maybe some kind of negotiation between building and trees and bushes and grass and flowers and plants is highly necessary. And that's what we see here. In fact, you cannot separate the house from the garden and the garden from the house. It's a brilliant conjunction of the two. We talk about sustainability today. Well, could there be a roof more sustainable than what we see here? And yet there is a level of almost archetypal modernity somehow. On the other hand, you wouldn't expect this kind of gardening, this kind of landscape around Villa Savoye. No, because you see, there is an interplay between architecture and the landscape. The architecture of Villa Savoye somehow requires landscaping that is kind of like it is in the field of, you know, of the building. Here, where you have an architecture that is earthy and raw in a way, the garden is also the same way. It's very rich and humid somehow. It is an architecture that is not dry, and the landscaping is not dry either. I love these buildings, by Lutyens, and I love the gardens. And I imagine he had, I didn't study the problem, but I think he designed the gardens as well. If we can use the word design. And look at this roof. You know, this is an innovative. Didn't I talk about betrayals? Well, here there is a level of betrayals, of architectonic betrayals. This is not just tradition here. No. In fact, if you look just at this fragment, you would wonder, what are these things? And I don't know, even the geometry of the roof. And it's very fine work. And I'm sure the levels of oxygen are also very high there, as opposed to our cities. Now, another house, but this time, in New Delhi, from 1928, a very dramatic change, because it's a different country and a different culture. And you wonder, you look at this building, and then you look at this building and you say, wait a minute, could it be that this is the same architect? He designed this in England, and then he designed this in New Delhi. Well, this is a palace. Of course, you know, the kind of garden or gardening he did in England, maybe it would not have been appropriate in India. This is a palace, you know, it's for the very top of society. And, you know, he was able, actually, like any good architect, to work within the field of private homes and, you know, large mansions or palaces. In other words, he moved confidently between the private life and the public life. And I continue to think that architecture at its best is when it is able to negotiate between the two fields, so to speak, the private one and the public one. So the publicness of this building is obvious, but maybe there are also levels of privateness. So let's read. The largest of all palaces in New Delhi, a building that suited the status of the Nizam of Hyderabad, designed by Edwin Luthiens, the majestic mansion had 36 rooms. Lutyens designed, I don't know if I pronounce all, Hyderabad or Hyderabad, the house in the shape of a butterfly, a plan that he had first used for Papillon Hall in Leicestershire in 1903. The main architectural feature of this house is a dome with an entrance hall beneath, with symmetrical wings, which symmetrical wings radiate, is a strange language, at an angle of 55 degrees. Its round arches, flanked by rectangular openings to the height of the impost, was inspired by the Pantheon in Rome, a city where Lutyens stayed in 1909. For the first floor windows of the Grand Place, Lutyens chose a combination of rectangular and round arches that were inspired by the Uffizi to the Arno in Florence. So, you know, a lot of cultured influences. The majestic building that boasts of courtyards, archways, obelisks, large flower containers, grand stairways, marble fireplaces, fountains, had a predominantly European character with some Mughal motifs. Then the planning and design of Lutyens Delhi, you know, he designed the layout, the master plan for the governmental center of Delhi. This is also from New Delhi from 1929. What more, you know, res publica can we aspire towards? Look at this, you know, it's It's an architecture. So it is amazing in a way. Just a few minutes ago, we looked at that villa immersed in nature, in the garden, with those, traditional sloping roofs. And look what he did now, a few years later in New Delhi. Truly a monumental. I mean, I don't know really if this is a European architecture with Mughal touches. I think the Mughal quality of the architecture is much more present than that text stated. This is not really at all European architecture. I think in this case, Lutyens showed very clearly that he understood the culture of the place. You know, something other architects later on didn't quite do. You know, I mean, in what way did Le Corbusier respect the culture of the place at Chandigarh? In no way. Although he was, and he sketched, he fell in love with a donkey, Le Corbusier, in Chandigarh, in India, and initially he hated the donkey. I don't know if you know, but Le Corbusier wrote violently against the donkey. The poor donkey, he accused the donkey that is the most stupid animal, that the donkey doesn't have a will, because the donkey avoids the big stones, as opposed to the architect who traces straight lines from an originating point to a target, to a goal. So the architect traces a straight line, the line of the wheel, while the donkey was zigzagging. But strangely enough, and he opposed him, actually, the architect, and he probably, meant himself, to the donkey, because the donkey didn't have a wheel, he thought, Le Corbusier thought, while the architect had. But the truth of the matter is known that the donkey could have a diabolical wheel, that you cannot push aside or move a donkey, because it's almost the paradigm of stubbornness. But what is strange is that Le Corbusier later in life, when he began to work for Chandigarh, he even thought of building a monument to the donkey. This is very amusing. Le Corbusier, the same man who wrote in an ugly way against the poor donkey, in the end wanted to build a monument for the donkey in Chandigarh. So there, talking about people born in the zodiacal sign called Libra. They're imbalanced people. They have dualities, and I should know what I'm talking about, because I belong to the same troubled zodiacal sign. Anyway, back to Edwin Luthiens. Now, see, this is an architecture clearly belonging to India, and I think he did a great job. And no wonder India considers New Delhi, Lutyens' New Delhi. He was the man who look, he formed, he gave reality, physical reality to, the political structure of the city and the country. And if he found inspiration in, let's say, Uffizi, or I don't know what else in Europe, the truth is he melted down these influences that they are not recognizable any longer. So it was not at all a pastiche. It's a creation. And not just because he placed some elephants there on top of this brick structure. No. By the way, I wonder, why is it that, for example, not too long ago, people, architects used like Otto Wagner, and you can, why is it that we eliminated figuration, narration, an animal, you know, an elephant, a lion to adorn a bridge or the corner of a building or something, you know. Our words are so poor and dry and they don't tell any story, you know. There is nothing to narrate with our words. I think it's a great loss. A castle. He even built a castle. And I don't know if this is the last castle. He built one that was called the Last Castle because, yes, castles are not built any longer. And indeed, if there is one architectural program that became obsolete, I would say the castle is. Yes, Drogo, the Last Castle. Sorry for the resolution. Sorry for the resolution of this picture. Also, here it is. But actually, if we look at this part of the building, this, I would say, has a level of modernity which is not at all to be underappreciated. If we make abstraction of what we see here and maybe even here, but this part, I think, is rather modern or modernistic, at least to an extent. And look at the interior. I don't know what it is here, a chapel or probably. Now this is another view. I like this part of the building very much. This one, but and it is stone, and stone is again like brick, a material that doesn't let you down. It has the prestige of nature. Also, I am thinking that if we look at these windows, if we can make windows like this, even if they are large, but to be divided into smaller parts, I think they are gentler. And, you know, today, office buildings, for example, do not have windows that open. You know, so inevitably we are supposed to use air conditioning, but air conditioning means working towards amplifying the climate change and not towards diminishing it. So there are things to reconsider now. We cannot build the office building and the office tower any longer as we used to. So this is the Last Castle by, as it is called, by Edwin Luthiens. Yeah, here it is a castle, all right, but here much less so. I mean, if we make abstraction of this part, this could be, besides the fact that it is a stone wall, rather modernistic structure. Now, the interior is not too modernistic, it's true, but plus, you know, it's a castle, it's not a modern building. 1935, a bank this time, you know, this is a few years before the Second World War, so we are, you know, almost in the middle of the 20th century. The Midland Bank, again, in 1928, Villa Savoie was built. This was built 7 years afterwards in Manchester. So it's a very modern building. I mean, now, I shouldn't say a very modern building. We still see Edwin Luthiens with a certain kind of monumentality that actually modernity kind of rejected. But it is an interesting building, nevertheless. Although, yes, very different. When you think about this, you know that this was built years after Louis Sullivan invented or promoted or both the skeletal steel Cartesian structure for the office tower. The kind of monumentality that Lutyens displays here and serves here is very different. So, Sullivan in the States built buildings which were much more modern than, besides not taking into consideration the ornamentation. But in terms of structure, of the rigorous, slender structuralism of his towers, here we see a building that I don't know, is it really belonging to 1935? And the interior, even more so, invites such a question. It's not a bad interior, but and it is connecting with classicism. It is connecting with a certain European culture. But I still find it a little bit strange that this building is so aloof, so divorced from, so distant from, earlier experiments actually in architecture. Now these windows, yeah, they are a little bit too complacently predictable, in my opinion. I also think that his early works, those incredible villas that he built until 1900 or at the beginning of the 20th century, are his best works. This is what I feel, without being an expert in Edwin Luthiens. I mean, 1935 and using such capitals and, columns. And yes, they came back to fashion in the works of Robert Stern, in postmodernism and all that melodrama towards the end of the 20th century, but that was not for the glory of architecture. The Baroda House in New Delhi, 1936, you see, even here, the plan, if we look at the plan, we kind of expect almost the same architecture that we saw in his early villas in England, with a courtyard and, even the general layout in terms of dimensions doesn't seem to be very different. But when we look at the building as built, and from the outside, we see a very different kind of architecture. Gone is the sloping roof, because also the climate is different. This has an official aura, almost institutional. It's a governmental building. It's called a house, but is actually housing an institution. And there is a level of hybridity here, which I don't know if it's a great quality. Now, 1936, the Australian National Memorial, he also built in Australia, 1936, 1938, so just before the Second World War. And look at this. I don't know. So again, he built monuments, but I still think his most valuable work is in the field of private residences in his early years. This is clearly monumental, but so kind of stiff in its symmetry, and there is even, I would say, a level of artificiality. Look even at the level of the landscape design. It's so very different from what we saw. I mean, just let us recall the house where Jimmy Page lives. It's almost as if a different man, he was a different man here than in those works. Yes, there is some power here in this tower. The monumentality is imposing, but I wouldn't say it's highly creative. except this staircase here, this is kind of interesting. But what we see here, some easily recognizable historicisms, which in my opinion are not very, very appealing even. Although seen from here, there is a certain austerity which is to be appreciated, I think. And this is the the plan, the rendering. The rendering is fine. Is a fine drawing. In its grayness, I think is a fine drawing. So we are now in Australia. We have been in India, and we also saw works by him in Great Britain. I don't know, this was a different proposal, or this seems to be a little different from what we saw. It's also a rendering, I think. Yeah, maybe it was modified, the project, during construction. The commemorative function of architecture is an important one. And unfortunately, we do not address it very often, but it is important. It has to do with memory, with paying duty, paying your respects towards a certain event, a certain person. Yeah, it's about memory. Some furniture designed by Edwin Luthiens. I promise that if next year we'll do another presentation, I will amplify it, because I think he deserves to have a more ample presentation. He designed a lot of furniture. I don't know. I mean, they seem to be a little bit too cozy and too comfortable somehow. At least these two. In a way, also a little too bourgeois. When I think of those brick walls and those early villas he built, and I see furniture now that is a little too conveniently immersed in tradition, and I don't know. I mean, at the turn of the century, Charles Mackintosh was designing exceptional pieces of furniture that were very, very creative. These are, in a way, too sweet and too domestic and too bourgeois. I mean, even this chair on wheels is, I don't know. I don't think Lutyens is at his best here. It might be comfortable, I don't know, and even easy to move around with, but I have seen greater chairs. So I'm not sure if that critic was really right. If indeed he was the best architect ever, not just of the 20th century, the first half of the 20th century. I still think he was at his best at the end of the 19th century and in the very few years after the beginning of the 20th century. There is too much historicism here, I would say. It's interesting, it's comfortable, but it's here is the man, a man with apparently silk socks. I don't know. And it seems, did you notice that his chairs, like here, there is an asymmetry, and now you see it in his own photograph that, he likes to sit, you know, a little bit diagonally on, even if this chair was probably not meant to be used in this way. It's the avant-garde Edwin Luthiens, the rebel, who sits on the chair. I don't know if it was designed by him, it's possible, but sits on it not quite as it was meant to be used. Anyway, I'm joking a little bit, but anyway, an interesting man, and with a hybrid kind of architecture. And furniture design as well. There are levels of hybridity. Some beach furniture. We are approaching the end of this presentation. A table, a desk. Again, these are rather strange chairs, you know. I say strange because you would expect this part to be in the back. Do you see the peculiarity of this armchair? If you know, you sit with the back towards this part, not towards this one. So he actually moved the back of the chair on the side. This should have been there, and this should have been here. So there is a strange diagonal movement, oblique movement in these pieces of furniture that probably induced him to sit like you saw him here. I don't know. I just had this idea, but it's kind of strange the way he designed this. You almost feel like sitting with a back here and with your legs above this arm of the chair and not the other way. Strange. A table. Again, these peculiar Edwin Luthiens chairs or armchairs, a throne, a little bit burlesque, maybe for a burlesque king or maybe queen. That's it. So thank you very much. Happy birthday, Edwin Luthiens. What is saying here? Screen sharing has stopped as the shared windows is closed. Wait a minute, you didn't see what I was talking about? Hello? Hello?
We saw it.
Yes, yes.
No, but I don't understand. This is all because I had to interrupt then the presentation, and now I received this message, this strange message